The rain had been relentless all morning, matching the heaviness in my chest. I stood by the grave, my heart aching, watching as they lowered my husband's casket into the cold, unforgiving earth. Brian Matthews, my husband, my partner of 25 years, was gone. The weight of his absence was a constant ache, but in the crowd of mourners, I couldn't escape the feeling that something darker, something much more personal, was looming over me. Evelyn, Brian's mother, stood beside me, her expression unreadable. We'd never been particularly close, but she had been part of my life for all these years. I had come to terms with the fact that we'd never be best friends, but we had always shared a certain mutual respect. At least, I thought we had. After all, she was the matriarch of the family, the one who always made the decisions, the one whose word was law. I had accepted it. What other choice did I have? The funeral procession had finished, and I thought, for a moment, that things might settle into a quiet mourning period. That maybe, just maybe, Evelyn and I could work through the grief together. I had no idea how wrong I was. The wake was at the house. Brian and I had lived there for years. It had always been our home, my sanctuary, the place I thought I'd spend the rest of my life. The house was a large, sprawling estate, filled with memories. It had been a gift from Evelyn and her late husband, and while Brian and I had maintained it, it was always clear that it had been passed down from Evelyn's side of the family. I had no illusions about who really held the deed. As the guests filtered into the living room, I felt an eerie tension in the air. The kind of tension that comes before a storm. I didn't know it yet, but the storm had already started. Evelyn called me into the study, her tone clipped and cold. "Claire, we need to talk," she said, standing by the large oak desk where Brian had once sat, organizing paperwork and notes. The same desk where we had made so many plans for our future. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Is this about the funeral?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is there something I missed? Was the service not up to your standards?" She waved a hand dismissively, her gaze sharp. "It's not about the service, Claire. It's about what happens next. You don't belong here anymore." I blinked, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "I'm not going to beat around the bush. Brian's death changes everything. You think you have a right to stay here, but you don't. You'll be leaving." My heart skipped a beat, and I suddenly felt as if the ground beneath me was crumbling. The room felt smaller, and the air felt thick. "What are you talking about? This is my home too. I've lived here with Brian for over 2 decades. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not anymore. You're not part of this family. Not the way you think you are. It's time for you to go." I stared at her, disbelief flooding my system. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But the look in her eyes was unmistakable. Cold. Calculating. She had made up her mind. "I've already arranged for the movers," she continued, her voice devoid of any warmth. "They'll be here tomorrow to pack your things. I'm sorry, but this is the way it has to be." I felt my knees weaken. The house, the life I had built, the love I had shared with Brian, it was all slipping away. And Evelyn, my so-called mother-in-law, was the one doing the pushing. "Evelyn, you can't do this," I whispered, my voice shaky. "I'm Brian's wife. This is my home." She turned away from me, dismissing me as if I were nothing. "You're nothing now, Claire. You were just a placeholder. Now you're just in the way." The door slammed shut behind me, and I was left standing there, in the room that had once been full of laughter and love, now reduced to a hollow shell. The following morning was nothing short of a nightmare. As Evelyn's cold words echoed in my mind, I couldn't wrap my head around what had happened. How could she do this to me? How could someone who had been like a second mother to me turn on me so viciously, especially after the death of her son? The house we had shared for so many years now felt foreign, alien, a place I no longer belonged. I sat in our old kitchen, staring blankly at the half-empty coffee cup in front of me. The house felt eerily quiet, the silence thickened by the absence of Brian. The kitchen had always been our space. It was where we had shared our first meal together after we'd gotten married, where we'd celebrated countless birthdays and anniversaries. The walls held memories that were now shattered, like fragile glass. I had planned on calling my lawyer, but what would I even say? Evelyn had made it clear that she held all the cards, that I was no longer a part of the family, no longer entitled to anything. As I sat there, I wondered if I could even prove that I had a claim to the house. The truth was, we hadn't discussed finances much. Brian had always handled that side of things, always too busy with work and his dealings with his mother. I had to remind myself that I was still legally his wife. I had rights. Didn't I? Before I could even gather my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I was met with the last person I wanted to see, Evelyn's assistant, Lisa. She was holding a clipboard, her expression tight as she glanced at me, almost apologetic, yet professional. "I'm here to let you know that the movers will arrive tomorrow morning to collect your things," Lisa said, her voice as neutral as ever, though I could detect the faintest hint of discomfort in her eyes. She wasn't the one who had kicked me out, but she was here, carrying out Evelyn's orders. "Lisa, you can't," I began, but she raised a hand, cutting me off. "I know this is difficult for you, Claire. But the arrangements have been made. You have to leave." Her words were soft, but they were final. She wasn't here to offer sympathy, just to inform me of the inevitable. "Why is she doing this? Why are you helping her?" I asked, my voice rising in frustration. "I've been nothing but good to this family. I gave everything for Brian. And now she's treating me like I'm some kind of stranger." Lisa looked uncomfortable, shifting on her feet, but didn't offer any explanation. She simply handed me a stack of papers from her clipboard. "These are the details for the moving company, Claire. You'll need to sign them." I felt a surge of anger rush through me, and I almost slammed the door in her face, but I knew I had to keep some composure. I couldn't afford to burn bridges now, no matter how badly I wanted to. I didn't have the luxury of losing any more ground. So, I took the papers, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you, Lisa," I said, as calmly as I could manage. She nodded and left without another word, leaving me standing in the doorway, the reality of my situation pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I couldn't. There was too much at stake. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, trying to piece together the fragments of my life that Evelyn had decided to tear apart. I searched through every drawer, every file, hoping for something, anything, that could give me leverage. The more I looked, the more I realized how little I knew about the financial situation of the house. I hadn't paid attention to the bank accounts or the deeds, assuming that everything was set up, that Brian had handled it all. But now, all of that knowledge was locked away in his mind, and Evelyn's. As evening fell, the silence in the house grew heavier, and I felt the walls closing in. I went to the bedroom we had shared for so many years, the room that now felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. I sat down on the bed, the memories of Brian's presence almost haunting in their absence. The familiar smell of his cologne, the way he used to leave his shoes by the door, the soft hum of his voice when he called out to me in the mornings, everything was gone. And now, I was being forced to leave as well. It was at that moment that I noticed the small leather-bound box sitting on the dresser. It was something I hadn't seen in years. Brian had always kept it locked away, and I had never been curious enough to ask about it. But now, with everything slipping through my fingers, I couldn't help but wonder if it contained something that might help me. With shaking hands, I opened the box. Inside were several old documents, some family heirlooms, and a few pieces of jewelry. But it was the papers that caught my attention. They were legal documents, something about property, assets, and a trust. My heart raced as I skimmed through them. There, in black and white, was a reference to a family trust, one that was tied to the house, to the estate that Evelyn now claimed was hers. The words leapt out at me: "Upon the death of Brian Matthews, the estate shall be passed to his widow, Claire Matthews, and not to any third party or family member." I couldn't believe it. Could this be real? Was this my chance? I reread the document twice, making sure I wasn't imagining things. My heart pounded in my chest. If this document was legitimate, then Evelyn had no right to kick me out. It was my home, and it always had been. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. I grabbed the papers and rushed out of the room, determined to get to a lawyer who could help me, someone who could understand the complexities of this family trust and how it could save me from losing everything. But as I reached for my phone to make the call, another thought struck me. Evelyn knew about this trust. She had to. Why else would she have acted so quickly to get me out of the house? The following morning, I drove to the law office of Simmons and Associates, a firm I had worked with briefly during Brian's and my brief attempt to organize our wills and life insurance. It wasn't much, but it was something. I needed help, and I needed it fast. Evelyn's eviction was an attack I hadn't anticipated, and if I didn't act, it would all be over. I entered the sleek, glass-walled office building, its polished floors and white walls making everything feel sterile, distant. I passed through the reception area, and the secretary, Samantha, a woman who always seemed a little too bright for my taste, smiled at me in that way she always did. It wasn't a real smile. I could tell. She knew exactly why I was here. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she simply nodded me toward the elevator. Inside the elevator, my thoughts ran wild. The papers from the box had proven to be an unexpected lifeline, but I couldn't help but question their validity. Was I reading it wrong? Was this just some old, obsolete document from years ago? I had no way of knowing for sure, and I couldn't wait for anyone to tell me that I was out of options. I had to act quickly. I was greeted by James, one of the senior partners at Simmons and Associates. He was older than I remembered, his salt and pepper hair giving him a distinguished air that seemed to contrast with the sudden desperation in my voice. "Claire, it's good to see you again," he said, his voice measured but warm. But I could tell there was a level of formality he hadn't used before. It wasn't unexpected, this was a professional setting, and I wasn't sure where the conversation would go. "James," I said, sitting down in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "I need your help. It's urgent." His brow furrowed. "Of course, Claire. What's going on?" I quickly explained the situation, the house, the eviction, and the family trust document I had found. James listened intently, not interrupting once, his face growing more serious as I spoke. "That's a tough one," he said after I finished. "The documents you're referring to sound like a legitimate claim to the property. If Brian's will and trust were properly executed, Evelyn has no right to displace you." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "But we'll need to go through everything with a fine-toothed comb. You say Evelyn has access to these documents? Does she know about the trust?" I nodded. "She must know about it. She had to. She didn't act so quickly without having some sort of inkling of what was going on. She's always been the one to handle everything with Brian's finances. I didn't even have access to his personal accounts. She's always been in control." James made a note on the legal pad in front of him. "That complicates things. If she's aware of the trust, she might be trying to remove you before you can get the legal backing you need. You'll need to give me the documents you found, Claire. It's critical that we establish their authenticity." I pulled the papers from my bag and placed them in front of him. James skimmed them, his eyebrows raising as he did so. "These are definitely from the trust," he said, his voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "And they state clearly that the estate belongs to you upon Brian's death. There's no ambiguity here." I exhaled in relief, but it was short-lived. There was still so much to do. "So what now?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from creeping into my voice. James tapped his pen against the desk, deep in thought. "We'll need to get copies of the official probate documents. If Evelyn is already trying to move things around, we'll need to make sure that this trust is properly recorded and enforceable. This might take some time." "Time I don't have," I muttered under my breath. "Evelyn's already moving to kick me out. She has movers scheduled for tomorrow, James." I need you to stop her. I need to stay in that house. James looked at me sympathetically but shook his head. It's going to be tough, Claire. You're going to have to be patient. The legal process can take time, and we're up against someone who clearly has the advantage in terms of influence. I nodded, my heart sinking. I had known this would be difficult, but hearing him put it into words made it all the more real. I don't know how much longer I can wait. I can't just sit back and let her win. I understand, James said, offering a small smile. But right now, your best move is to make sure everything is in order. We'll get this sorted, Claire. I'll do everything I can, but I need you to trust the process. I stood up from the chair, feeling both encouraged and discouraged at the same time. James was right, I did need to trust him. But trusting the process felt like relying on something fragile, something I couldn't control. And if I had learned anything over the last 24 hours, it was that I had very little control over anything anymore. Just as I was about to leave the office, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen and saw a message from Lisa, Evelyn's assistant. My stomach twisted. Just a reminder that the movers will arrive at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Please be ready for them. I felt the blood drain from my face. Tomorrow. That was it. Evelyn wasn't wasting any time. But then another thought occurred to me. Why was Lisa sending me reminders about the move? She knew I had legal counsel now. She knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. Was she trying to provoke me, push me to do something rash? The next morning, I woke early, my mind already racing with thoughts of what was to come. It was 8 a.m., and the movers would be arriving in just 2 hours. I had no intention of letting them take a single box out of that house without a fight. James had promised to get the ball rolling on the legal front, but nothing had been officially filed yet, and I couldn't afford to sit idly by while Evelyn took over everything. I dressed quickly, my hands trembling as I pulled on a simple black dress, a somber choice, I thought, given the circumstances. I felt the weight of grief mixed with the heavier weight of betrayal. This wasn't supposed to be happening. My husband's funeral was only the beginning of this nightmare, and I hadn't even begun to process my loss fully. I took a deep breath as I stepped out the front door. The movers would be here soon, but I had one more thing to do before they arrived. I called a few people, family, close friends who knew the situation, and invited them to the house, telling them I needed help to stop the move. I couldn't do this alone. Evelyn might have had the power, but I had people who cared about me, people who knew the truth. By 9:30, the first of my friends arrived, Laura, a childhood friend who had known me and Brian since we were young. She had always been there for me, especially after the rough patches in our marriage. I could see the sympathy in her eyes as she walked toward me, but she wasn't about to sit back and let Evelyn steamroll me. Claire, Laura said, hugging me tightly. I can't believe this is happening. You've been through enough already. I can't just let her throw me out of my own home, Laura, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I need to stop the movers. I need a moment to breathe before all of this is taken from me. Laura nodded firmly. We'll get through this. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. But you need to be careful. Evelyn doesn't like to lose, and she'll fight dirty. As the minutes ticked by, more friends arrived. One by one, they filed into the house, offering me moral support. But none of them could stop what was coming. I had no real legal recourse just yet, and Evelyn's influence was hard to ignore. At exactly 10 a.m., as the clock struck the hour, the moving truck pulled into the driveway. The rumble of the engine was like a punch to my gut, and my heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. I looked around at the group of friends gathered in my living room, all of them looking back at me with a mixture of concern and determination. We have to do something, I muttered under my breath. Just then, I heard the doorbell. I had a sick feeling in my stomach as I knew exactly who it would be. Lisa. The same assistant who had delivered the eviction notice just the day before. I opened the door to find her standing there, clipboard in hand, her face as unreadable as always. Good morning, Claire, she said, though it was clear she wasn't here for pleasantries. The movers are ready to begin. I trust you've gathered your things? I stared at her, trying to suppress the anger that surged inside me. No, Lisa. I haven't gathered anything. I'm not going anywhere. Lisa gave me a polite but insistent smile. I'm afraid you don't have much of a choice. You've already been informed that the house is being vacated. Please don't make this difficult. I stepped aside, opening the door wider to allow the movers to enter the house. But before they could take a single step, my friend stepped forward, blocking the doorway. Laura, as always, took the lead. You're not taking anything out of this house, she said, her voice calm but firm. Claire is staying right where she is, and you're not going to be the ones who take her out. The movers looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable. I could see that they didn't want to be involved in a conflict, but they had a job to do. They were only following orders. Lisa, however, wasn't about to back down. Do you really want to make this worse? She asked, her voice cold. You're making a scene. This could turn ugly. I didn't flinch. It's already ugly, Lisa. But I'm not backing down. Laura crossed her arms, her face steely with resolve. You can tell Evelyn that if she wants this house, she'll have to take it through legal means. Claire is entitled to it, and we're not going to stand by and watch her lose everything. Lisa's eyes narrowed, but I could see that she was rattled. She glanced at the movers, then back at me, clearly torn about what to do next. I'll have to make a call, she muttered, turning to leave. But don't think this is over. The door slammed shut behind her, and I let out a shaky breath. My friends and I stood there in silence for a moment, none of us knowing what would happen next. But I could feel the tide shifting. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I had no idea if Evelyn would retaliate with even more force or if she would back off. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't giving up. Not yet. The next few days felt like an endless stretch of tension, every minute pulling me further into a spiraling abyss. Despite the temporary victory of halting the movers, I knew the battle was far from over. Evelyn had always been calculated, and I could see her preparing for her next move. I wasn't sure how long I could hold out, but I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. Not when I had something to fight for. I spent my days poring over the legal documents James had advised me to gather. My hands ached as I flipped through pages of trust agreements, property deeds, and Brian's old financial records. The more I looked, the more I realized how little I actually knew. It had always been Brian who took care of the finances. He had trusted Evelyn to manage the estate, and I had trusted Brian. But now I was starting to feel the sting of that trust, knowing that Evelyn had been pulling the strings all along. But even with the documents in front of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The pieces weren't fitting together. It wasn't just a matter of legalities, it was a matter of power. Evelyn had always held the power, the control. And now, she was using that power to rip away the only thing I had left, my home. I had been avoiding calls from my family. What was I supposed to tell them? That I was being kicked out of my own house after my husband's funeral? That Evelyn, the woman I had known for 25 years, was now treating me like an outsider? It wasn't just embarrassing, it was devastating. The weight of isolation grew heavier with every passing hour. My friends were supportive, but they couldn't do much more than offer words of encouragement. They didn't have the resources or connections to challenge Evelyn's influence. It was hard not to feel completely alone in this fight. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I picked it up, not expecting anything that would change the course of my day, but I froze when I saw the sender. It was from Evelyn's lawyer. My heart skipped a beat. Dear Ms. Matthews, I am writing to inform you that our client, Evelyn Matthews, has retained my services to formally evict you from the property located at 401 Maple Street. As per the terms of the family trust, you are not entitled to remain in the residence, and our client has requested that you vacate the premises immediately. Please consider this a formal legal notice. If you refuse to comply, we will pursue further action. We advise you to arrange for your belongings to be removed at the earliest opportunity. Sincerely, Jordan H. Clark, Attorney at Law. I read the email again, my mind racing as I tried to process the words. So, Evelyn had gone straight to legal action. She had already filed for eviction, and now I had been officially put on notice. There was no turning back. The stakes were real, and they were higher than ever. I felt a sharp pang in my chest as the reality hit me. Evelyn had taken this fight out of the realm of family disputes and put it squarely into the legal arena. The gloves were off. And I wasn't prepared for what came next. The email had a sense of finality to it that made my stomach churn. I couldn't just sit here and let her win. But with the legal threat looming over me, I knew I had to move quickly. The clock was ticking, and my options were dwindling. I called James in a panic. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, and it felt like the ground beneath me was shifting with every ring. When he answered, his voice was calm, but I could hear the weight of my anxiety in his tone. "Claire, what's going on?" he asked. "James, I just got an email from Evelyn's lawyer. She's officially filed for eviction. I don't know what to do. They're going to take everything from me. I can't let her win." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. James was clearly taking in the situation. "All right, listen to me. First, don't panic. We've got a window to fight this, but we need to act quickly. We'll need to go to court. But we'll need more than just the documents you found. We need to prove that this trust is legitimate, that Evelyn is trying to circumvent it." "I don't have time for that," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "She's pushing me out of my own home, James. I need something, anything, that will stop her." "Claire, I understand. But we need to play this smart. If you go public now, if you make any rash decisions, it could undermine our position. You have to trust the process." I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, numb, listening to his calm voice as he continued outlining what needed to be done. The truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. The legal route wasn't fast enough. Evelyn was winning, and I felt powerless to stop her. I hung up after a few more words, not because I was satisfied with his advice, but because I couldn't bear to hear him telling me that I had to wait. Again. The next morning, as I sat in the house, my eyes fixed on the stack of papers in front of me, I knew I couldn't keep relying on people who couldn't act quickly enough. This was my life, my home, and I couldn't wait for the system to play out. I had to take matters into my own hands. As I paced back and forth, something caught my eye. It was a letter, a piece of paper that had been tucked away in one of Brian's old drawers. I pulled it out, and my heart skipped a beat. It was from the bank, confirming the settlement of a loan in full, signed by Brian. But that wasn't the interesting part. It mentioned a secondary trust, one that had been established in my name. Suddenly, everything clicked. I couldn't believe what I was holding. The letter from the bank wasn't just an old financial document, it was a key. The secondary trust, in my name. It had been established shortly after Brian and I got married, and I had never known about it. I read the letter again, trying to digest what it meant. Brian had set up a separate trust for me, one that could override anything in the family trust. It was my way out of this nightmare. I rushed to my desk, grabbing my phone and dialing James' number with trembling hands. As the phone rang, my mind raced. This was it. If I could get the bank records and the trust documents into his hands, we could stop Evelyn in her tracks. We could win. I felt a surge of hope I hadn't felt in days. James answered quickly. "Claire, what's happened?" "I found it. A secondary trust, one that Brian set up for me. It's in my name, James. We can use it to challenge Evelyn's claim on the house." There was a brief silence, then a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "That's huge, Claire. But we need to move fast. Do you have the documents?" "I've got them right here." I'm heading to the bank now to get the full details. Can you be ready to take action? This could turn everything around. I'll prepare the paperwork. But remember, we can't tip our hand too soon. Evelyn will try to fight this, and we need to be ready. I hung up, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I wasn't going to let Evelyn win. Not now. Not after everything she had put me through. I grabbed my purse and hurried out the door, heading straight for the bank. The sooner I got the official records, the sooner I could turn the tide. At the bank, the process was slow, the staff wary and unsure of how to handle the situation. But after what felt like hours, I finally held the official trust documents in my hands. It was real. This was my lifeline. But as I was leaving, I ran into someone unexpected, Lisa. She was standing near the entrance, her eyes locked onto mine with an unsettling coldness. "Going somewhere, Claire?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost mocking. I clenched my jaw. "I'm not leaving until this is over, Lisa. You should tell your boss to back off. This house is mine." She didn't flinch. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low. "Evelyn won't let this go. And you don't have the power to stop her." I stared at her, not giving an inch. "You're wrong, Lisa. This isn't over yet." I walked past her, feeling the tension in the air thicken. Evelyn's threats didn't scare me anymore. I had the proof I needed, and now I just had to make sure it was used to take back what was mine. The courtroom felt like a battleground. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the weight of Evelyn's presence. She sat at the front, her lawyer by her side, radiating confidence. I, on the other hand, was barely holding it together. My hands trembled as I clutched the trust documents, ready to present them as my defense. James and I had spent days preparing, but now that we were here, it felt surreal. The room was packed, family members, acquaintances, even the movers who had been sent to push me out of the house. Evelyn had brought everything to the table, and I could see in her eyes that she was ready to fight dirty. The judge called the proceedings to order, and Evelyn's lawyer stood first. His arguments were smooth, rehearsed, and full of legal jargon meant to confuse and overwhelm. He claimed that the family trust superseded anything I had. He painted me as an outsider, someone trying to claim what wasn't rightfully mine. But I wasn't backing down. When it was my turn, I stood tall, despite the nerves gnawing at me. James guided me through the presentation, walking the judge through the discovery of the secondary trust and the undeniable proof it gave me rightful claim to the house. As I spoke, I could feel Evelyn's glare burning into me, but I didn't look at her. I focused on the judge, who was listening intently. James wrapped up the argument, and we waited. The tension was unbearable. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but when he returned, his words were clear. "The secondary trust is valid," he said, turning to Evelyn's lawyer. "The property belongs to Mrs. Matthews." I exhaled sharply, relief washing over me. But Evelyn's face twisted in fury. She had lost. With the legal battle behind me, I finally reclaimed my life. But Evelyn's fall from grace is only beginning. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge's decision echoed in my ears. "The secondary trust is valid. The property belongs to Mrs. Matthews." It was over. But as the gavel came down, I couldn't shake the feeling of the weight of everything that had led to this point. The months of grief, betrayal, and uncertainty had all culminated in that one moment. I had won. I had fought for what was mine, and the law had supported me. But there was still one more thing I had to face. Evelyn, sitting across the room, didn't immediately react. She stared at the judge, her face an unreadable mask. For a moment, I thought she might get up and leave quietly. But that wasn't Evelyn. She stood up sharply, her voice dripping with venom. "You think this is over, Claire," she spat. "You've won this battle, but I'll make sure you regret it. I'll make sure you never have peace in this house." Her lawyer moved to intervene, but the judge cut him off. "Enough, Mrs. Matthews. If you continue with these threats, I'll have you removed from the courtroom." Evelyn's fury simmered, but she reluctantly sat back down. Her gaze flicked toward me, hatred burning in her eyes, but she knew there was nothing more she could do. The battle had been lost, and I had won. As the proceedings wrapped up, I felt a sense of numbness wash over me. It was hard to feel joy, even in victory. The house was mine, but the toll it had taken on me was steep. The relief was there, yes, but it was bittersweet. I wanted to move on, to heal, but I knew that it would take time. I didn't leave the courtroom alone. Laura, my oldest friend, was waiting outside, her eyes bright with support and pride. She threw her arms around me in a tight hug. "You did it, Claire. You really did it. I knew you would." I squeezed her back, my throat tight. I had to. I couldn't let her take everything from me, not after all these years. Not after Brian. This was my home. It's always been mine. As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I still had so much to work through, emotionally, legally, even financially, but I knew I could handle it. The worst was behind me. Days passed, and I began the process of re-establishing myself in the house, securing everything I needed for the future. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. The house, once a symbol of love and betrayal, was finally a place where I could rebuild. Then, just when I thought the dust had settled, I received a call from James. Evelyn had made a last-ditch attempt to challenge the trust in the higher courts, but she was met with a crushing blow. The documents I had found, combined with her aggressive tactics, had finally worked against her. The court ruled against her attempt to further contest the trust, and she was ordered to pay my legal fees. It wasn't the vindication I had imagined, but it was fitting. Within weeks, Evelyn's life began to unravel. Her personal affairs, once so tightly controlled, started falling apart as the pressure from her failed attempts to take the house mounted. She lost her standing in the community, and rumors about her underhanded dealings began to spread. It wasn't long before she was practically ostracized, and her influence in the family started to wane. People who once feared her now saw her for what she truly was, a woman who would do anything to maintain control, no matter the cost. As for me, I found my own peace. The house, once a battleground, was now a sanctuary. Slowly but surely, I made it my own again. It was no longer the place where I had lost Brian, it was where I had fought for what was mine, and where I would honor his memory. In time, I found new strength in the silence of the home we had shared. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when the grief was still overwhelming. But I had reclaimed my life, and with that came a sense of power I had never known. I'll never forget what Evelyn tried to do to me. But I also learned that no one, no matter how powerful they seem, can take away your dignity if you're willing to fight for it. In the end, it was my resilience that won, not just the trust or the house. It was my ability to stand tall in the face of betrayal that mattered most. And so, with each passing day, I healed. The house became not just a symbol of what I had lost, but of what I had gained. It was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at home. Author's note. In stories of betrayal and family conflict, the greatest victories often come not from the courtrooms or legal battles, but from the quiet strength of those who choose to stand their ground. Claire's journey reflects the power of resilience, the importance of fighting for one's rights, and the eventual peace that comes from reclaiming what was unjustly taken. Though Evelyn's actions were cruel, her downfall was a natural consequence of her greed and manipulation. True justice, as we see, is not always swift, but it is always deserving.